Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my screen. My name is David Fass, and I'm the trainer at InetSoft. And so this is the third in our monthly installment, third installment in our monthly series of short training classes. And this one is going to be on creating tables. So if somebody could just quickly chat me and just make sure that, I just want to make sure that you're hearing my voice, okay? So somebody in the question box or the chat box, if somebody could just let me know that that I'm being received. Oh, I see something popped up here. Okay, thank you very much, Johnny. Appreciate it. Okay, and several other people. Okay, wonderful. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so let's take a look at what we're going to cover today. Right, and so we did some other things in past weeks. I think last week, or rather last month, we looked at charts. And today we're going to look at adding tables to a dashboard. In particular, we're going to look at these three tables. So not every dashboard needs tables. Some dashboards are more high level, and the information can be conveyed just with charts and gauges and so on. But many dashboards do need to convey more detailed information, and for that purpose, tables are useful. So the first table that we're going to do is just a very straightforward table, kind of a detail table, and we'll look at some aspects like sorting and highlighting and stuff like that. So let's begin. I have open over here my Visual Composer already started up. And so there's a few different ways to add a table. First of all, if I expand my data block here, right, so I've expanded my data block in the Visual Composer, and again, I've already pressed the new view sheet button, so I have a new blank view sheet here. View sheet, again, is a dashboard. And if I want to add a table, let me just illustrate a couple of the ways to do it. First of all, if I have a data block like this and I want to add all of the fields, right, I want to create a table based on all of the fields in the data block, then what I can do is I can simply drag the entire data block into the dashboard, and that will create a table, just a very plain Jane kind of table based on those fields, one column for each field. Right, so that's probably the quickest and easiest way to create a table, but obviously, it's not going to be every case where you want all of the columns from the data block in the table. So let's take a look at the, kind of more, I guess, selective construction of a table. So if you want to create a table with just a particular set of fields from the data block, then what you can do is find the table component. This is in the toolbox. So you find the table component, you add a table component, and then into that table component you drop whatever fields you want. So I'm going to go ahead now and create this table here with the set of fields that you see. Luckily I have that on a piece of paper, so I don't need to keep referring back to that, slide. So let's go ahead and build this table. The first field that I want to add is category. So I'm going to drag the category field just like so, and now I've got a table with one column. And then I'm just going to go on picking the other fields that I want. I want the name column, and when I drag this in, you can see that there's a highlight, a green highlight that appears in various places. So if the highlight appears on the left here, like it is now, then that means that this field, if I drop it there, would be placed to the left of the existing column. If I drop it on the right, that means it would be placed to the right, and so on. Okay, so that's where I want to put it. I want to put it on the right. If I drop it right on top of the existing column, then it would replace the existing column, which is not what I want. So I'm going to drop it to the right, just like so. Okay, and then I'm going to continue on. We want additionally a date field. So I'm just going to do this more quickly now that we got the idea. Company field. We want city. And state. And finally total. So that's all together. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns. Let me just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so those are the columns that we want. Okay, and that's a basic table, right? So if all you're looking for is the most basic table, then there you go. You got a table. Okay, but let's take a look at some, some variations on this. First of all, we'll take a look at adding a table style. Right? So You can style a table simply by selecting a region of the table and then using the toolbar up at the top to color it and so on. So for example, if I wanted the date column header here to be yellow, right, I can select that column header and then go up in the toolbar, find the fill color, and select a fill color, and that will style that particular part of the table. And I could follow the same procedure to set the font or the size of the text, the color of the text. All of those visual properties I can set on a region-by-region basis. So if I wanted to style the title bar, I could select the title bar and add a fill color and so on. So this is kind of what we would call kind of ad hoc styling of a table, and you could certainly do that, and nobody's going to blame you for that approach to styling a table. But what I'll illustrate is that there's another approach to styling. Let me just undo those changes. And the other approach is to apply a global table style. So sometimes you want to format a table all in one shot without individually visiting every different part of the table. And so what you can do in that case is you right-click on the table and select Properties. And in the Properties dialog box for the table, there is this thing called Table Styles. And there are a set of predefined styles. Right? So in fact, the one that we're looking for here is some kind of blue header style. So what you can do is under the blue folder, you can look for the style that you want. Let's say something like this, right? Dark header, clean bands. And then what this will do is it will apply the style that you see to the table. And obviously that applies to the header row, it applies to the detail rows, it applies to the column headers, and so on. Now, the question that some of you may have is, what if you don't like any of these styles and you want your own? You can, in fact, create your own table style, but you need the desktop development tools to do that. So we're not going to cover that here, but it is possible. It's actually pretty easy if you have the desktop development tools. So anyway, I'm just going to select this style, although, this one doesn't have bands, so let me take one without bands. So how about this one? So I'll take that style, and then that does a universal format on the table. Okay, let's take a look at some other aspects of tables. Okay, how about sorting? All right, something that people often want to do in a table is sort a column. Let's say I wanted to sort alphabetically by company. I can do that by hovering the mouse over the column header. In particular, over the right side of the column header, there's a little chip there. If you move the mouse over that little chip, you get this sort column button. You press it once, you get alphabetical sort, press it again, you get reverse alphabetical sort, press it a third time, it returns to its original sort. And you can do that on date fields, on categorical fields, on numerical fields. So for example, if I wanted these in order, let's say descending by total, I can click that 2 times, and that will give me descending by total dollar amount. Okay, so that's an illustration of sorting. Let's see what other things we can take a look at, kind of simple, easy things, and then we'll get into something a little bit more interesting. You'll notice that there's a button up at the top, an export button. Basically what this will do is it will export the data in the table to Excel. Right? So this is something that people sometimes need to do. You have a table and you need to do some further computations on that data, or maybe you need to share it with somebody who can only read an Excel file. Whatever the case is, you press that button and the browser will then download. All right, so I don't know if you can see in the bottom of my browser, this is how my browser works. It creates a download, downloads an Excel file, which then you can go ahead and open up in Excel. Okay, so that's the export feature. The next feature that I want to take a look at is filtering. Right? So filtering is basically where you want to restrict the values shown in the table based on some criteria. Okay, now, it's important to note that in general, when you're building a dashboard, you're going to rely on selection components to implement filtering. Right? So when you're building a dashboard, although we're not building an entire dashboard here, we're just playing with tables, but when you're building a real dashboard, if you wanted a user to be able to, let's say, filter on company, what you would do is you would grab the company field and you would drag that in like that, and that would give you a selection list, and then when the user makes selections of these companies, the table would be filtered. So that is the the most common approach to filtering, but there is another approach. Right? And you'll notice that if you right-click on a column, let's say right-click on the total column, that there's a filter option there. Right? Now, if I select this filter option, I'm going to get a warning message. Right? So let's do that. Select filter, and I get a warning message that says, please add a selection container. Right? So in order for this feature to work, you need to have a selection container somewhere in the dashboard. Right? So let's add that, and I'll explain why that's necessary in a moment. So I'm going to find this component called a selection container. Here it is. Right? It's in the selection folder, selection container, and I'm going to add that in over here. Right? And so now, in fact, I do have a selection container in my dashboard. Now let's go ahead and try that again. I'm going to, again, right-click any cell in the total column here, select filter, right? And now what you see is that I get this little widget that pops up that allows me to filter on the totals. Right? So I can drag this, and let's say I want to look at only totals between $40,000 and $60,000. Right? So I set that range. Right? And that filters the table. So now the totals that I'm looking at here are only totals between $40,000 and $60,000. Now, why was the selection container necessary? Well, that's how I can know when I'm looking at this dashboard. That's how I know what the filter is currently set to. Right? So otherwise, if I didn't have this selection container here showing me this information, and I'm looking at the dashboard, how would I know what filters are in place on the table? I would have no idea, right? So the selection container is to convey information about filters that are currently in effect on the table. And you can go further. You can add other filters. So let's say I wanted to restrict the set of companies to a particular set of companies. I can right-click on the company column, select filter, and then I can choose some subset of companies here. And then click away. Right? And now I've got another filter in place, and the selection container shows me all of the filters that are currently in place. Right? So this is another approach to filtering. Again, this is less common than the selection list approach, but this is another approach. And if you want to clear those selections, you can do that. Perhaps the easiest way is simply from the selection container. You just press the erase button in the selection container, and that will remove those filters. So that's an approach to filtering tables. Okay, let's take a look back at the picture and just see what else we need to do here. You can see that in this example we've got some highlighting. That's those yellow bands here, and basically what I've done is I'm highlighting rows where the state is New Jersey or the state is New York. Right? So basically I want to set a condition that applies a particular formatting on a row-by-row basis when the state is either New Jersey or New York. So that's called a highlight. Right, so let's see how to do that. Oops, wrong application. Sorry. Okay, back over here. Okay, so let me apply the highlight. Okay, so I'm going to click in the state row. Doesn't really matter though. I can set the highlight anywhere, but I'm going to click in the state row, the state column rather, and then right-click and select highlight. Right, there's an option here, highlight. It's always easy to confuse that with hyperlink, but they're quite different. So if you make that mistake, you'll very quickly discover it. Anyway, you select highlight, right, and that brings up this dialog box that allows you to set a highlight. So I'm going to press the add button. And this highlight, we'll call it NJ or NY. This is just an arbitrary name that we give it so that we can distinguish various highlights later on. Press OK. And for this highlight, I want to apply a yellow background. Right? So whenever the condition that I'm about to set is satisfied, I want to see a yellow highlight. Yellow background rather on those cells. Okay, so that's the formatting, and then I want to apply it to the entire row. If I don't select apply to row, then the highlight is only going to appear on the column that I've selected, which is the state column. But if I want it to appear on the entire row, I select apply to row, and then I just have to create the actual condition. So I press the edit button down at the bottom, right, that was down there, the edit button, and the condition is going to be state is one of, right, and then I'm just going to add New York and New Jersey here. Okay, New Jersey and New York, press append. Okay, there's the condition, state is one of NJ and Y, and that's it. Press OK. Right, so now I've got my highlight condition completely defined. Press OK. And then if you scroll through the table here, what you'll see is that in any case where the state is New York, it's highlighted, and in any case where the state is New Jersey, it's also highlighted. Right, so that's a basic concept of highlighting. Okay, let's do one last thing to this table, then we'll move on to something a little bit more interesting. I believe if we take a look at the picture again, yeah, what I've done here is I've formatted the date column in a slightly different way. I think that's the only other change that we're going to make to this table. So you can see the date here, it's got the 3-letter abbreviation for the date and then the day and the year, whereas if you look at our example that we've done here, it has, you know, just the numerical version of the date. So how would I change that? Well, basically that's done with the format dialog box. Okay? Now you can do some basic formatting from the toolbar. I think we looked at this maybe last week or the week before. So, you know, if you need to set decimal format or percent format or something like that, you can do that from the toolbar. But if you need to do something a little bit more subtle, like setting a particular date format, then what you do is you click in the region that you want to format. So any cell in the date column, right-click and select Format, and that opens up the Format dialog box. Right, so there's a bunch of things you can do here. You can set colors and fonts and so on, but what we want to do is set the actual format. It's the way that the data is represented, and we're going to switch this to a date format, and then I'm going to enter a code that defines how the date is specified. So if I want a 3-letter month abbreviation, that would be capital M, capital M, capital M. Right? That will give me a 3-letter month abbreviation, then followed by the day, which is represented by D, and then followed by YYYY, which is the 4-digit year. Right? So this is basically a code that specifies how I want those dates to be represented. Now, you can be quite creative with these codes, so you can pretty much represent dates in any manner that you want. The downside is that, you know, it's a little bit confusing because you have to know what these various codes mean. We discuss it in the documentation, and we've actually borrowed this from the Java standard, this system. So, you know, so there's a lot of information out there about it, but this is the approach that you take. You use these codes to build the date format. And of course, there's also some presets in the menu that you can select from, so that's the easiest way to do it. Then once you've got it, you press OK, and that will apply the format. So now I've got the dates formatted in the way that I want them. Okay, so that's it for the first table. Let me get rid of the selection container. All right, so that's an example of a basic or regular table. It's just you know, essentially the raw data in columns. Okay, let's move on to something perhaps a little bit more complex, and that is a crosstab. So the next table that we've got down here, this is a crosstab table, also called a pivot table, and it's breaking out the data in various groupings, right? So we've got groupings by category, and in fact this is just the top 4 categories. So we want the top 4 categories as the row header, and then it's breaking out the using the column headers, it's breaking out the data by year, and we're looking at 2 different measures, total and amount. Right, so there's a lot of information that this is presenting. It allows me to look for any given year and look at the top 4 categories, any of those top 4 categories, and find the total sales and the number of units sold for that year and that category. And then I've got a grand total at the bottom. So let's see if we can whip this up quickly. So it is a crosstab. So I'm going to look for a crosstab component. Whoops. Okay, so here's a crosstab. It's in the data view folder. And I'm going to drag that in over here. And as soon as I do that, it opens up the crosstab editor. All right, so as soon as you add a crosstab to the view sheet, to the dashboard, you get this crosstab editor, and that prompts you to select your row headers, your column headers, and your measures. So let's start building this. For the row headers, we want the categories. So I'm going to, from the data block here, find the category field and add that as the row header. For the column header, we want the years. So I'm going to find the date field and add that as a column header. And then we want two measures. We want both total and quantity purchase. So I'm going to add two different measures, drop in total and drop in quantity purchase. Okay, so this is the way that you would set up a basic crosstab. You can add multiple fields as row headers and as column headers, right? So if you wanted, let's say, as the row header, you wanted nested groups, let's say category and state, you could create a nested set of groups that's perfectly feasible. But we won't do that in this case. But let's see if we can just open up the options here, right? And what I would like is I would like to show the row total, right? Because I want that grand total down at the bottom. So I'm going to select the row total here and press show. Okay, well, let's see what we've got as a result of doing all this. Press the apply button, and that should give us a crosstab. It's not exactly what we want ultimately, but you can see that it has the basics of where we're going. We've got, as our column headers, we've got the years, and as our row headers, we've got the categories, and down at the bottom, we've got a grand total. And you can see that for each combination of year and category, we've got two different measures, total and quantity purchased. Now, one thing I said is that what we'd like to look only at the top 4 categories according to dollar amount, right? So the top 4 selling categories. Right now, we're looking at all of the categories. There are 7 of them. So, I mean, in this particular example, it's not a big deal whether you look at 4 or 7, but more generally, let's say if you had a row header with 300 values, it might be a little bit more important to limit that somehow. Okay, so let's see how you would do that. We'll go back into the editor for the crosstab. So I'm going to click on the edit button at the top right corner of this crosstab, and then I'm going to click on the category field. Right? So when you click on these different fields, you'll see some options that pertain to the field that you've clicked on. So if I want to set a filter, a ranking filter on category, I click on that field, right? And then I go down to the ranking property, right? So ranking is basically top N or bottom N filtering. You want the top so many or bottom so many groups. So what I'm going to say is that I want the top 4 groups. Right? The top 4 groups of category based on the total, based on the aggregated total. Okay. I have a choice here. I could choose also to select the top so many based on quantity purchased, but in this case I'll select them based on total, press apply, and now you can see that the number of categories has reduced to just 4. These are the top 4 according to their sales. Okay, let's make a couple of other changes here to get this to look a bit more like the example. One of the things that's different in the example is that in the example the 2 measures are side by side rather than one on top of the other. That's easy to change. Right? So I'm just going to right-click on the crosstab, select Properties, and then go over to the Advanced tab. This is the Properties dialog box for the crosstab. And there's an option there called Summary Cells Side by Side. Summary Cells Side by Side, and that will do what we want. Press OK. And now we've got the total and the quantity purchased side by side. And I can make this a bit wider, see if I can get everything on one screen. Just like this. Okay. Now, so we're getting closer to the picture that I showed. There's a question. Question is, information in this webinar, does it apply to Style Studio? Style Studio is basically, it's going to be different in Style Studio. Creating a crosstab in Style Studio is, has a different editor and, some different features. So I would say that the information that I'm showing you is not directly transferable to Style Studio. So I guess I'd advise you to check the documentation or maybe wait for a future webinar where we cover Style Studio topics. Okay, thanks for asking. Okay, so let's continue on this. Now you'll notice that the headers here that give us the names of the two measures are a little bit verbose and they don't quite fit. So one way to change that would of course be to make the columns wider. I can easily either by resizing the grid or resizing the columns. But perhaps an easier way is just to change the header. So I'm just going to change this one just to say total, and I'm just going to change this one. I'm just double clicking in the header, in that measure header, and that one I'm just going to change to say amount. So you'll notice that when I change one of those headers, it changes every header for that same measure. So I only need to change one of them to say total and change one of them to say amount, and that propagates to all of the other groups. Okay, so we're getting closer. Now let's take a look at the notion of hierarchy. Right, so you may have noticed that next to these years there are these little plus symbols. Basically, this is an automatic drill that's created. So let's say, this is fine. I'm looking at this on a year basis, but let's say that I want to look at it on a quarterly basis. Right, so what I can do is I can click the drill down button for 2011, and what that will do is it will expand out. Right, you see that it introduces a second level of grouping based on quarter. So now I see the 4 quarters for 2011, and I can examine these numbers on a quarter-by-quarter basis. I can click that again, click one of the plus signs, and that will drill me down to another level of date, this time to month. Right, so now I can look at the values on a month-by-month basis. Now, in some cases, the result is not always going to be meaningful when you rely on the auto drill. So if I expand down over here, right, so if I expand down further, then basically it's going to take me down to the day level. That may or may not be meaningful, right? So if there were sales on a particular day, then I'm seeing those numbers. But, this might be a little bit too fine a view of the data. So what you can do is you can actually restrict the levels that the user can drill to. Let's see how you can do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the properties for the crosstab. And then there's a hierarchy tab here. Go to there. And this will allow me to define a particular levels in a hierarchy. So even though I have those that date drill, those date hierarchy automatically, if I want to control that, what I can do is I can create my own date hierarchy. So I'm going to drag the date field in, and I'm going to drag it in 2 more times, each time dropping it right below the previous date. And you can see that even though it's the same field in every case, right, it's grouping that field differently. So what this is saying is that in this particular hierarchy, I'm going to have the top level is by year, then the second level is by quarter, then the third level is by month, and there's nothing under that. Right? So this will allow a user to drill down to the month level, but no further. Right? So this is how you can control that date hierarchy. But I also want to show you that you can create your own hierarchies. So what we have here is a category row header. Right? So the category row header basically gives us information on a category-by-category basis. Let's say that I wanted the user to be able to drill down into a category to see the particular products in that category. Right? Well, I can do that. Right? I can do that by setting up a hierarchy here. So I'm going to set up a separate hierarchy. You can see that it has a little hint here. It says drag here to add a hierarchy. So I'm going to follow that advice, grab the category field, drop it in there, and then under it I'm going to drop the name field. Name is the product names. Right? So what you can see is I now have 2 independent hierarchies. I have a hierarchy that basically controls the drilling on date, and I have a hierarchy that controls drilling on category. Right, so this is how you set up your own hierarchies. Press OK. Right, and then what you see is that I still have this drill here on date, but I shouldn't be able to go down below the month level. Right, so you can see that when I get down to the month level here, right, that's it. There's no further access to any levels below the month level. Okay, so that's the drill on the date, and yeah, you'll also notice that there is now a let me make a little more space here. there is now also a drill on the category. So for any of these categories, if I want to look at the various products in the category of business, I can press that plus symbol, and it will break out the measures according to those products. Okay. So that's basically an illustration of how you can control hierarchy. Okay, let me close that up. Now let's go ahead and add what's called a flyover to this crosstab. A flyover allows you to basically, it's most useful for crosstabs and for charts. Basically, it allows you to point at a group, and then if you have another table or another chart or another component in the dashboard, it allows you to dynamically filter that component based on the group that you're pointing at in the other component. So in this case, I want to be able to point at a group in the crosstab here. Right? And when I point at that group, I want the table up here to update to show me only the details for that group. So let's see if this works. I'm going to make this component a little bit smaller. Okay. And I guess I could make that a little bit wider there. Okay, so let's see how you do this kind of flyover view. So you right-click on the crosstab, and then go to Properties. And under the, sorry, I was going to say under the General tab, but it's under the Advanced tab. Under the Advanced tab, you've got this area here called Flyover Views. And this basically allows you to set the flyover. So there is only one other component in the dashboard, and that is this table called Table View 1. That's just the ID of that component. So if I want that to be the flyover view, then I would select that, press OK. And now what's going to happen, hopefully, when I move the mouse over the crosstab, you can see that depending on what group I point at, the table up above is being dynamically filtered. So I'm going to point at a group 2013 and personal. Right? So this is the year. I clicked on that to make the selection stick. The year 2013, and the category is personal. And if you look at the data in the table up above, right, what I should see, oh, I think I lost the scrolling. It caused me to lose the, let me do that again. Okay, so we've got, right, so category is personal, and for the dates, I should only be seeing dates of 2013. Okay, so this is the concept of a flyover, and it allows you to basically dynamically filter one component based on groups that you select in another component. Okay, let's see what else there is to do with a crosstab like this. We have our grand total. Let me just see if there's anything else in the picture before we move on to the last one. It looks like we've done some formatting here, so I suppose we could go ahead and do that. But otherwise, I think that one is pretty much done. Yeah, so let's just add some quick formatting to make it look a little bit better. And again, I can go, I can apply a table style if I want. So I can right-click on this guy, select Properties, and just go with some one of the default table styles. Let's say something like this, light header borders. Okay, so there's a style. And if I wanted to add additional style, for example, like we have it in the picture where we've got these cells, you know, in a light green color or something like that. Whoa. All right, so what I can do is I can select a cell and then set the background there, select another cell, set the background there, and then set the background for these cells however I like. Okay, so that's it. So that's an example of creating a crosstab. And again, a crosstab is in many ways like a chart. It basically displays aggregated data, so it allows you to compress a lot of data into a small amount of space, just like a chart does. You know, so in many cases, you may find yourself deciding, you know, whether to use a crosstab to display your data or to use a chart. They can both display the same data, just a table displays it numerically and a chart displays it graphically. Okay, let's take a look at the last concept that we're going to cover, the last table. And then when I'm done, I'll take any questions that anyone has. The last table here is an example of what's called a freehand table. Now, what's different about this? Well, you can see that it looks partially rather similar to the table that we just made, right? It's got the top 4 categories, it's got the 4 years, it's got the same measures, but what's different is that I have down here also the top 4 states, right? So this is well, actually, you can't do this with the basic crosstab editor. So let's say you wanted to do something like this. What would you do, right? What would you think to do? Well, you would go over here, perhaps. Let me create a copy of this. I'm going to copy this, paste it down here. And I'm just going to remove, for this copy, I'm just going to remove the flyover so that we don't have to keep waiting for the other table to update. Let me just turn off the flyover. Okay, so now I've got an exact copy of the crosstab. So my first thought would be, if I want to add the top 4 states, is, well, I would go into the editor here, right, the crosstab editor, and I would add the state field, right, as another row header. Right, so I'm going to drag state in there. Right, so I've got state now as a second row header. Press apply. Right, but you can see that what that does is it basically creates a nested grouping. Right, so now I've got, I've still got the top 4 categories, right? The table is a bit taller now. I still have the top 4 categories, but within each category, it's breaking it out by state, right? So that's the result that you can get just using the basic crosstab editor, but clearly that's not the same as what we want. What we want is basically the top 4 categories and then the top 4 states, essentially independent. Right, so in order to do that, we have to kind of move beyond the limitations of the crosstab editor, and you do that by converting the table into a freehand table. Okay, so a freehand table is basically a table where you're dropping some of the restrictions and also some of the ease of use of the basic editing methodologies, right? And you're gaining some advanced abilities, right? So it's harder to do, but you can do more. Right, so what you can do is you can create a freehand table from scratch. There is a freehand table component, and basically you can add that component and then open the freehand table editor and build up a table from scratch. But in many cases, it's easier to begin with a table that's already, kind of halfway there, and that's what we're going to do in this case. So let me put this crosstab back the way it was, just by removing that state field. So now this is again back just the same as it was above. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this to a freehand table. So I'm going to right-click on the table, this third table here, and I'm going to select Convert to Freehand Table. Right? That's how you do it. It's that simple. Right? And not much has changed. You can see that some of the formatting was lost. I'm not sure exactly why that happens, but that seems to happen when you convert. We can always apply the formatting back later. But other than that, the table looks identical. But now what will happen if we press the Edit button in this, what is now a freehand table, if we press the Edit button, we're going to get a different editor. Right? So we're not getting the same old crosstab editor that we got before. Right? So this is a different editor, and it's a more powerful editor, but also a little bit trickier to use. So I'm just going to do a very basic example just to give you a taste. And what I want to do is, first of all, remove this grand total row. This is not going to really make much sense once I introduce the states. So I'm going to right-click on that row and select Delete Row. So the grand total goes away. And what I want to add now is a new row that will basically expand to give me a list of states. You can see that I've got a cell here that's expanding to give me a list of categories. That's where the category list is coming from. And I can do the same thing to give myself a list of states. So I'm going to right-click on that row and select Append Row. Right? So that gives me a new blank row down below. And then into that row, I'm going to place the state field. Right? So now I've got this cell, this category cell, expanding to give me a list of categories. And I've got this state cell expanding to give me a list of states. Now, if I leave this as it is right now, I'm going to get a list of all of the states in the data set, at least. But what I want is the top 4 states. So how would I set that? Well, what I would do is click on that cell to select it, And then down below, next to the group area, right, so you can see that group is selected automatically, meaning that that's a grouping field. So that's correct. But there's a little edit button to the right. If I press that, I can set some properties for that group. And I'm just going to set here the very same ranking property that the category already has, and that is that I want the top 4, in this case, states, according to the total in each state. Right, so that's how you would set a ranking in a freehand table. So now I've got a ranking on the state, and now I'm just going to add in the total and the quantity purchased here. So there's total, and there's quantity purchased. Okay. And that should basically be it. Now I've got the list of categories and the total and quantity purchased for each category, and it's going to give me then a list of 4 states and the total and quantity purchased. Oh, let's take a look. Press the apply button and we'll see what we get. Okay, so there it is. Let's make sure we have the right number of states if I drag that down. Okay, so that looks right. I've got 4 states. Okay, so now I've got 4 categories and 4 states, and I can make this look a little bit better now. Let's just take a look back at the picture. I think the only difference is just the coloring at this point. So let's just update the coloring, and then we'll call that done. So I'm going to make sure that these are centered, and these ones I can make bold. And then I'll add some coloring back here. So for the headers, I can make that, I guess, dark blue. Sorry, dark green, and then make this one a dark blue. And then make this a light blue. And just to give some visual distinction, to the data, so that it's easier for a user to parse when they look at it. And of course, if I want to add a color up here, or something like that, I could do that. The last thing I'm going to do, though, is just change the title here. You can change the title of a table just by double-clicking and typing. And I'm just going to call this top 4 categories. Whoa, that wasn't English. Categories and states. Okay, top 4 categories and states. And that's basically it. Maybe I might want to put some kind of a boundary between them, although it's probably not really necessary, but let's see if I can throw down a border. I think I removed the border. Wait a minute. And so just throw down another border. Where was it? Black bottom. And then I could add just one here, perhaps. Oh, where am I going? So it just gives, I actually think it looked better before, but it just gives some visual distinction. It looks like I also ended up applying those up above. I could probably turn it off for those cells. So anyway, I'm just going to leave it there. So that's an example of a freehand table, which again, it can be fairly complex. You can make fairly complex structure, and it is slightly more difficult than doing the basic crosstab, but it also gives you more flexibility. So so my recommendation would be, when you need to create a crosstab, start off with a regular crosstab and see if you can get what you want with the regular crosstab. But just keep in the back of your mind that if you need to go beyond that, you can convert it to a freehand table, which gives you some additional editing capabilities. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And if anybody wants to ask questions, I'll stay online for a while, take some questions. You can type them in the question box or the chat box, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Okay, there's one. Can you reconvert a freehand table to a crosstab? And the answer is no, you cannot. It's a good question. It's a one-way trip. So once you create a once you create a freehand table, then it's always going to be a freehand table. So that's that's why one of the reasons why I say don't rush into making a freehand table, because once you're there, you can't go back. Of course, you could always press the undo button, so you can do if you create a freehand table and then discover that you're not getting where you wanted to go and you wish you could go back, then you could press the undo button, but there's no convert back. Okay, any other questions? Another question. Okay. Where will we find the link to the recording? I think we send that out. I think Mark Flaherty sends out the link to everybody who's registered for the session. So I believe you'll probably get an email. Usually it takes me a day to convert it into a usable format. So probably Monday you'll get an email with the information to find the video. Okay, there's a question: can multiple tables be connected as flyovers? In other words, can you filter multiple tables simultaneously? Is that the question? Yeah, yeah, I believe so. Let's try it out. Let me move this one down a ways. Okay, so let's say that let's say we had another table. I can't think of a good other table, so I'm just going to, just make throw together something else just for proof of concept. I'll throw in here company and category and I don't know, reseller and region. Okay, so now I've got this table, and let's say that I want to dynamically filter both this new table that I just added and the one above it based on this flyover on this crosstab. So what I would do is I would go back into the properties for the crosstab, and you can see that I've got a list here for the flyover views of the various components that are available, and it appears that I can select both table 1 and table view 1 and table view 2. Again, those are the IDs of the two components. Press OK, and let's see. Right, so now when I fly over this crosstab, you can see that it's dynamically filtering both of those tables. So the answer is yes. Okay, any other questions? Okay, there's another question. Oh, sure, my pleasure. Okay, any other questions? I'll just wait a few more seconds in case somebody is typing. It takes me a long time to type questions, so. But it seems like I've answered every possible question, so that's great. I know that's not true. As you think about it some more, you'll have more questions. I believe you all have my email. At least some of you figured out how to email me already. So, so if you do have questions about anything that we covered here, always feel free to send me an email. I'll try to reply right away. Question. Here's a question. Does the flyover view that you just did for the second table, does it still filter by date? Yeah, it's filtering based on this table. So this table, when I point at a group on this table, it's for a particular year and a particular category, and so it is, even though this table here does not have the date column in it, it is filtering that based on date. So when I hover over a particular date, the data in both of these tables now is only data from that particular year. That's a good question. Okay, any other questions? Okay. Seems like everybody's all questioned out. So thanks very much for joining, and hope you'll come back next month for the next exciting installment. Until then, oh, here's a question. Oh, just a thank you. You're very welcome. Okay, thanks very much, everyone, and have a good weekend, and hope to see you back next month.